All right, fellas, we'll get started in just a second. One moment. All right, fellas. All right, fellas. How you doing? I was gonna do a normal show later today. Probably still will. Definitely got to get some stuff posted for videos and whatnot. But obviously, I woke up, at least like a lot of folks over here, to the news that what is it? 900 layoffs at not just Sony but within PlayStation. The Twisted Metal game that Firesprite was doing, which, as I've said, I knew someone was making something, but I've never seen anything, but it seemed pretty clear. It was happening. That was canceled. Here, I'll tell you the list of stuff that we know was pulled. But before we get to that, if you don't know, yeah, it's 900 people got laid off. Herman Hulse sent out an email, and Jim Ryan sent out an email and basically kind of saying we have to change the way we do business, and specifically citing kind of the narrative-driven games, which is not a surprise. We all knew that this was coming. We all knew that this was a very real possibility and a probability, but it still sucks. I mean, obviously I haven't worked for Sony for a very long time. And, so it's not like, hell, I don't even know that many people left at Sony, but I know a number of them. And, I don't know if any of them have gotten hit, but it's still, even though I haven't been there in a very long time and I've had some serious issues with their output this generation in terms of, well, you guys know what I think about certain things, if you watch the show a lot. But yeah, I don't know. It still kind of feels, I still feel this one, not, again, I'm not the story. No shit, Jaffe. It's not about me. I'm just saying that I am having an emotional response to it, which I'm surprised by. But because I was so affiliated with them and I worked there for so long, and I know there's really good people there, so it's more personalized, I guess, is what I would say. But I'll tell you the games that are affected and the studios that are affected, and then I'll just kind of see what you guys are thinking. I'll turn on the red phone. We'll talk about it, and get your thoughts and whatnot. Okay, it's pretty brutal. Pretty brutal. The thing I think that for me is the most impacting just emotionally is there, it's just this kind of horse shit of you're part of the family, and we all know at this point, nobody really believes that. There was like a picture going around of Jim Ryan's farewell party from the London studio, and it was 5 days ago, so he knew what was coming down the line. And I get it. He couldn't say, it's not his job to, expose the information at the wrong time. But he's sitting there smiling, and he's surrounded by other Sony people, all of which I assume for the most part are now out of a job, and they're smiling, and, and it's just more evidence and more proof that, I don't want to say these people are not your friends, because a lot of them are your friends, but they're not to be counted on. I hate to say it, but it's fucking true. And it doesn't mean that they're bad people. They're just in a position where they got to do their job, and everybody's working. And it sucks. Scotty Woodford says, shouldn't the upper management be fired? Sure, but I think you have to really ask yourself how much of this is, layoff. There are different kinds of reasons to do this. My understanding is this is a correction from a lot of hires and a lot of spending. And in that, by laying off a lot of people, the stockholders make more money. And in that, one could easily argue that upper management is doing their job well, quote well. But sure, at the same time, if one of the things that is cited and people are speculating is, well, how much of this has to do with the earnings call where they're saying, yeah, they made a lot of money, but their actual profit was down because, or their revenue was down from where they expected it. I think they said it was at 3% instead of 9%. And a lot of analysts expected 20% because the games have gotten too expensive. And in that, I would agree with you that there is some upper management to blame. Let me get Bold Alpha Wolfpack has just joined the Diet Soda Soldiers. Thank you very much for that, sir. I appreciate the support, and I appreciate you being here with us. And then he goes on and he drops a goddamn super chat. Welcome to the team, buddy. Here's what he says. They need unions in gaming. I'm not suggesting your heart's not in the right place. I think it is. And I'm a fan of unions. I think workers need protection. But what are you going to protect them from? I mean, unless you're going to make it illegal to be a public company and make the responsibility of the folks who run those public companies to make profit. I mean, you can't unionize. I guess you can unionize against layoffs, but I mean, ultimately they're layoffs, right? They're like, hey, we can't afford to pay all these people. We got, where's the money going to come from? I mean, I guess you could say it's going to come from, and I'm in a world when it comes to what I'm about to say that's not my level of knowledge. So correct me if I'm wrong. I may very well be. But if you lay people off and you make more money for your company, and then a union comes along and says, if you lay these people off, we'll fuck you with a strike over here. I guess then they would be able to go back to their board or their shareholders and say, well, financially speaking, it's not in our best interest to do these layoffs because it's a short-term fix, but then we'll have to deal with a 6-month strike. So, yeah, I mean, I'm down for that shit. I mean, I think it's going to be very difficult to get video games to unionize because you got to get the high-paid people on board. And so far, they really haven't shown a lot of interest. You've seen a lot of QA people, of course, sign up. Why not? But I haven't heard a lot of programmers and designers and artists and producers signing up for this. But I agree with you in theory. Yeah, Gavin Howell says, then they'll just sign everybody on temporary contracts. Right. One Winged Angel, it's not the point. One Winged Angel says, well, he says two things. First off, he says, Jaffe, spread my butt and stuff me. No, I won't. No, I don't care how much money you send. That's not my cup of tea. But I could do it if I close my eyes. Alexa, stop. She's like, don't do it, Jaffe. Don't make the deal. If I closed my eyes and imagined, and it was like $1 billion, maybe. Maybe. Remember that Black Mirror when the guy had to have sex with the pig? It doesn't matter. Wooger Man. Welcome to the Diet Soda Soldiers. You as well. I like your avatar, sir. It's one stick and a button, the old school Atari joystick. Thank you, buddy, for supporting the show and being here with us today. But the other thing he says, though, One Winged Angel says, though, is tech sector layoffs. Oh my God, I'm shocked. And it's kind of like, yeah, Nathan Montgomery says Alexa was ordering lube immediately. That was crazy. The thing is, it's not that anybody's shocked. It's just, this is, and even me, it's not, I've known that, and not because I'm some brilliant guy and I could read the tea leaves. I just listen like I usually do to Sean Layden. And he's like, it's not sustainable, folks. And he wasn't some backseat driver like me anymore, or now I am now. He ran the fucking division. He was telling you it wasn't sustainable. So this isn't a surprise. So it's less about like, oh no, I'm shocked, One Winged Angel, and more about just, come on, man. I mean, this is the, I don't want to paint it with too broad of a brush here, but it kind of feels like the beginning of the collapse of what we knew of as classic PlayStation. And it doesn't mean PlayStation's going away. Of course not. It doesn't mean PlayStation's in trouble. Of course not. This is happening everywhere. But I do think it is very clear that it can be read as a turning of sort of a tide when it comes to sort of what we expect from those studios and the amount that we expect from those studios. I'll tell you, they did cancel the Twisted Metal game. Let me tell you the ones that were canceled, because it's the news is coming fast and furious. Vin Diesel's like, I'm going to make another one. It's got nothing to do with what we're talking about, folks. I know. And I know you know that. But I'm just like, I don't have to tell you. It's just the brain. Here's what they say. Let me bring it up for you guys and for me, for all of us. Maybe they will kill the Gravity Rush live-action trash movie for an actual game, says Morgan. I don't think the budgets necessarily come from the same place. So in that, I don't think it really matters. I think it's more about, like Sony Santa Monica. Well, let's put it this way. I mean, these guys killed... Here, I'm bringing it up right now. I'm sorry to be so unprepared, but this is just all happening. So... yeah, I don't know how Twisted Metal succeeds in this era, says Cyclone. It doesn't succeed at this budget. It could very well, like, the guy, again, but like I've said over and over, gamers are going to have to get used to, or at least gamer aficionados are going to have to get used to playing at different budgets. Like the guys who make wonderful games, who are the guys? Dave Oshry's company. Come on, man. You know who I'm talking about. A lot of retro boomer shooters. They're doing a car combat game, but they're probably doing it for under $1 million. And if it works, they'll throw more money at it. And if it doesn't, they'll move on into their next game. But to make a proper pro game anymore, New Blood. There you go, Rob. Thank you, buddy. I think that's, those days, you're not going to get that anymore. So Holst said, our goal at PlayStation has always been to make the best games for PlayStation fans, and our global community of studios represents some of the most creative and talented teams within the business. We need to step back, though, and look at our business needs. At the same time, our industry's experience continued and fundamental change, which affects how we create and play games. Here's what he says that's really interesting about this. Delivering the immersive, narrative-driven stories that PlayStation is known for at the quality we aspire to requires a reevaluation of how we operate. A reevaluation of how we operate. What does that mean? We don't know. He knows, but we don't. Delivering and sustaining social online experiences, allowing PS gamers to explore our worlds in different ways, as well as launching games on additional devices such as PC and mobile, requires a different approach and different resources. So, I mean, these guys are there's some pretty big changes happening there. I don't agree with you, Morgan. Morgan says they did this in 2020 with Sony Japan, and that was a way better studio. Look, one of my favorite people, and I would have no career without Alan Becker, ran Sony Japan. And I'm not saying they didn't put out some good stuff and some stuff that you liked and a lot of people liked, but very rarely did you see Sony Japan coming out with hits. They just didn't. I mean, they came out with a lot of swings, and every now and then they got on base. Come on, Jaffe, what are you, a sport? Come on, what are you doing? Well, I like baseball. Shut up. Listen, every now and then they got on base, but to act as if Sony Japan was some sort of, bastion of success and they shut it down for no reason. Oh, well, Morgan says, what hits did London put out? I'm not talking about London. I'm just talking about, it's not just London that got hit. If you think all we're talking about is, they canceled the Twisted Metal game. No, this is across the board. They've laid people off from Insomniac, Naughty Dog. They closed the London studio. They canceled Twisted Metal. They canceled that London project they were doing about the futuristic fantasy set in the UK. There were. I'm trying to find the list. There's a list going around that I want to say. Hang on. I'll get to those super chats in 1 second, fellas. And I'll turn on the red phone too. I want to hear what you guys have to say, but give me 1 second. I just want to see what these games are. That they canceled. And I don't know. What I'm not seeing anywhere here is anything about Santa Monica, which is good, obviously. I don't know what they're working on over there. Let's see. Sony. Sorry, I should have had this up, but this is all just kind of happening. But the point is, though, it's happening worldwide. It's not just happening in London. And there were a number of titles that have been shut down. Let's see. I want to find those for you. Here's that picture I was talking about, by the way, with Jim Ryan and all the people. I mean, let me bring it up. Sorry. It's so indicative of this bullshit where it's just like, they're not your friends, man. And I know people know that, but maybe I know that because I did it for a long time and I've been in the business and now I'm not. Maybe younger people have no clue. I have no idea, but it's just so heartbreaking when you see people buy into this shit. There we go. Okay, here's the picture that I was talking about, right? So this was 5 days ago. All these people, I assume, are now out of work. It's terrible. It's terrible. Veers, thank you for the super chat. He says, so far, they've not killed the person and is able to control mouse with brain. Oh, okay. It's got nothing to do with what we're talking about, but sure, I'll bite. Elon Musk brain thing has not killed the person. Wow, that's a sign of success. And is able to control the mouse with the brain. Can't wait to use it instead of controllers. Hey, man, I'm a fan. I'm never going to let Elon Musk get anywhere near my fucking brain pan. But if other companies come on board and they're more dependable and reliable, absolutely. Thank you for the super chat. But Elon Musk, no. Scotty Woodford, thank you, buddy. He says exclusives are going to be gone in 2 years. Exclusives are never going to go away. I don't agree with you. I think exclusives, let's forget for the moment the far-flung future or the semi-immediate future where everything's streaming. Exclusives will be huge then because let's not get into a debate about how close or far that is. If you're talking about consoles, maybe. I mean, but at that point, Scott Woodford, what's going to motivate somebody to buy one console over the other? I mean, you think Mario's going to be on everything in 2 years? I don't think so. And Xbox probably won't have a console. I mean, they say they will. But let's say Xbox stays in the console business and let's say Sony stays in the console business, which it sounds like they will. Why would they not have exclusives? I mean, what's going to differentiate one from the other at that point? Woogerman, thank you, buddy. He says the correction is going to continue this year. Paradigm shift in the business. Right. Models will happen. Maybe higher prices, subs, smaller games. 100%. 100% man. It's absolutely what's going to come down the line. It's what we've been talking about. When you're these executives and you can see all the money being made on things that don't cost what this shit cost, there's an audience for it, but the audience isn't growing and the costs keep going up. We've been talking about this forever. Aries, thank you, buddy. He says, bottom line, games are too expensive to make. Yep, 100%. Devs and publishers need to start cutting costs or there'll be another gaming crash. A gaming crash, whatever. Because here's what I'll tell you. I lived through. This makes it sound so dramatic. I lived through the gaming crash of '81 or whatever. Truth be told, though, games still existed. You lost your consoles, you lost your arcades. PC games were thriving. I don't know about thriving financially, but there were always PC games coming out, right? So video games have never stopped being made since they gave people the ability to make them. But yeah, I certainly think there'll be a crash of all these people who maybe, and that's why, I kind of am supportive of a lot of what's happening. Not people losing their jobs, of course, but that's sort of a side effect. And hopefully, Sony's a good company and there's severance and all that shit. But, that's how art and commerce work together, is that ultimately, as the business makes its demands, the art adjusts to the business model. But the essence of why people love video games, that hasn't gone anywhere. And that's happening at various budgets. And so I think what you also are seeing is, Sony came along and they found a very sweet spot that they could dominate, but it really never played to the heart of interactivity. And I know people get mad at me when I say it. And I'm not saying you're wrong for loving those games that they've become famous for and super successful with. Of course you're not. They're great. But they're not the essence of the medium. And as all the bullshit falls away and all the money goes away, the essence remains. And the essence is making bank basically right now. So if you're one of these executives, why would you not learn that lesson, especially as you're starting to realize you can't sustain this shit? Garrett, you old knucklehead, thank you, buddy. Welcome to the Diet Soda Soldiers. Chris, hey, Chris, welcome back. Welcome back to the Diet Soda Soldiers. Regardless, good to have you both here. I appreciate it. Garrett says, I feel for teams that lose years of their lives creating something they'll never see the light of day. Stig comes to mind, and Corey. We have all, yes, Garrett, thank you for joining. We have absolutely all had, we've all been hit by games being canceled if you work in the business. And it's devastating because especially when you work for a company like Sony, but I imagine it's any video game company or creative company, you just have to work on faith that it's going to ship, right? It's so crushing because you have to sort of become naive consciously sometimes to the process of all these people who are saying this is great and the dog and pony shows and, oh, they liked my game, I get to keep going and all this. And you are at the whim of decisions that have nothing to do with how hard you've worked or how good your game may very well be. And so, yeah, you fall in love with the work that you do. And it's a real harsh slap in the face when someone comes along and cancels it. And you're like, but this was mine. It's like, it was never yours. It was always theirs. It's just the way it is. And it sucks, man. But, okay, so let me turn on the phone. I'm trying to find this list. If anyone can find it, I apologize. I should have had it up, but I assumed it would be all over the place at this point. We know Twisted Metal was canceled, but I'm trying to find the list of other games because I was surprised by just how large the list was of things that they shut. Oh, Bend, Oregon had Bend Studios had a original IP that was canceled. Was that all they were working on? They had the game that Ben lost theirs, and then the one that they were doing, the Uncharted reboot, that was canceled. According to Zuby Tech, live service games still in development at PlayStation are Helldivers 2, obviously, Concord, Fair Games, Horizon Online, Media Molecule, and a unknown title. So I wonder how Sony got hit. I wonder if every studio got hit. The fact that Insomniac got hit is insane. The fact that Naughty Dog got hit is kind of insane. So how do we know these games are canceled? Addy Pie says, well, because we're looking at the news right here. This is the guy who was the art manager for this game. This is the fantasy game in London that was canceled, that got set in London. The art director, Seren Daly, says, after a decade, my time at PlayStation in London is at an end. So, you know. I was a buyer at EB, says Woogerman, in the 90s. There were meetings that games like EverQuest were going to tank the games industry because it was taking up all gamers' time. Fortnite, Roblox, Minecraft are doing that now, right? Right, 100%. 100%. I mean, that's where we are now. But it's where we are if you want to go into it at that level. What I think is great is that if you just remove, for the sake of discussion, not like you can remove the human element out of things, but if you remove the human element out of it for a moment at a philosophical level, we really are in a time where, while this is really bad, the ability to make your own games and to express yourself through interactivity is easier than it's ever been, and it continues to get easier. And so I think that's the good in all of this, is that the medium itself is becoming richer and more interesting and more accessible. But yeah, I think we'll look back. There'll still be these big, massive games. Of course there will. Every industry always has that. But I think as this corrects itself, you're going to see more and more of the essence of the game industry and come up. And I'll tell you one more thing real quick. I'm playing, it's also staggering how good games can look made by just one person or a few people. I'm playing that game, the Beyond Hanwell trial or teaser on Steam. And I made a video about this the other day, but it's one of the best looking horror games I've ever seen. And I think it was made by a handful of people, and it's all Unreal 5, right? It just looks like better than anything I've ever seen. And if you would have told me it's a AAA game, I think it looks better than Silent Hill 2. And I know they're spending a hell of a lot more money on that game than this game. So just the all of this has needed a correction for a long time, and that's what we're seeing. But it still sucks. Psycho Clown says, it seems like the gaming industry is in its awkward teen years. We're seeing growing pains. I wish I could come up with a better analogy, because it seems like, because I was there for all of this, where, we would fantasize about selling 100,000 copies of a game like Mickey Mania back on the Super Nintendo days and Genesis days. And then PlayStation comes along and makes gaming, quote, cool, right? And with that comes the budgets and the narratives and all these other kind of things. And it absolutely did what they wanted to do, which is they made gaming, or they were a big part of making console gaming more mainstream. But in the process, though, it's as we've been talking about, it's not sustainable. So is it going to, I don't think it's going to go back to not being mainstream, because mainstream is Fortnite. Mainstream is Roblox. Mainstream is Pal World at this point. So I think, the trajectory is good for games. It's just the kind of games at the budgets people have been used to from Sony. I think you're going to see a lot less of those is all. Why hasn't Sony been doing AA longer, says Addy Pie. Some of their best work is there. Probably because the profit margin is not enough for them. Probably because they look at it and they say, yeah, you could make a $14-15 million game and we can make a profit, but it's not at the level we want it to be. Yeah, Spectre Bull, yes, I have absolutely seen the Twisted Metal game. It's not possibly. It sounds like it's absolutely they canceled Twisted Metal. So they need to bring back cheap, fun hack and slash. I mean, One Winged Angel says, I don't disagree, but again, the number of people who, you can see it right here on this stream is, if I stream a game or I talk about a game or I bring a game to someone's attention that is kind of a AA game, a lot of people shit on it, and some of it's trolls, but some of it's like, yeah, it's not why a game. I want to see the best of the best graphics and all that. I just, what's the industry going to look like when those people aren't being served as much? I don't know. Will Sony learn anything, says Jonathan, from the success of Helldivers 2? I think so. I absolutely think so. I mean, I think what you'll learn is that, service games can work, multiplayer games can work, gamer games can work. And not that they didn't know this, and that's why they greenlit it. But I think it's nice to see a game like Helldivers come along and do so well, because it shows that Sony can connect with an audience with more game-centric games and less narrative games, which is great. Because, look, as much as I loved and a lot of people loved Returnal, that didn't do very well. It's nice to see one do really well. I loved River City Girls, says JoJo D 1 and 2, because I watched Jaffe play it. Oh, well, yeah, but it's a great game, too. It's a genuinely great game. Maybe Sony will back off the movie games a little bit, says Levi. I don't think they'll have any choice. I think that's clear. Gavin, I agree. Gavin says Returnal's still my favorite release this gen. For first party, I would say for me it's Ratchet, but after Ratchet, I would absolutely agree with you. Returnal is a classic. It's. I remember when I played it. I remember playing it and saying this is going to be like this is like gaming's Blade Runner. It's not going to sell copies, but it's going to be something that people talk about for a long time. I thought it was an excellent game. All right, if you guys want to have your say and tell me what you think, you can call me. Let me turn on the red phone. If anybody is on the red phone, I won't be answering it. So, there's about a 6-second delay, but don't call me if you hear somebody talking, because I won't be able to get through. Or you can put yourself in the Discord. But if you want to use your cell, 619-786-3431. Think about... JSD says I didn't play Returnal. I just did Demon Souls. The Demon Souls remake was fucking amazing. Nathan Montgomery, who is a game developer himself, says Tower Song, which is their first game, they just put it up on Steam, was made mostly by 2 people. We had to hire a composer and artist as we didn't have the skills. It was a year and a half, and it cost a little over $100K. Right. I mean, again, the fact that you can make a game... if you've looked at his game, especially the combat screens, it's an RPG. The idea that game could be made by a couple of people now is, at least from someone who came from the days where you couldn't do anything without a team of much larger. It's amazing. It's amazing to me. Piotrek says... that's the result of forcing games as a service on most studios. What's the result? Because I wonder about that. Because the games as a service, Bend, Oregon made Days Gone, and Sony said selling 8 or 9 million copies isn't enough. So I think it was less about we're forcing you to make games as a service because we're greedy. I'm sure that's part of it. And more because we... are like, look, we can't sustain these big games that you guys are making unless they're, top of the food chain, like a Last of Us or a God of War or something. And I love Days Gone. I'm not knocking Days Gone. Oh, thanks, baby. Yeah, but I'm streaming right now. Give me 10 minutes. Take him, would you? Thanks, bud. That's what is maybe the silver lining. There's a lot of talent with a lot of time. Well, I mean, that's the, hey, sorry. Yeah, shut that. Thanks, buddy. That's kind of the thing, right? The people in the industry who are laid off, they will find, if they want to stay in it, this is going to be a great time to build studios and kind of replant once they get, over it, which is going to take some time, of course. Hey, it's Jaffe. What's up?
Hey, Jeff. How you doing?
I'm good. What's going on?
Hi, my name's Rico. A long-time Xbox player, but I've been following the PlayStation brand a lot more since you've been covering it, which I really appreciate your insight, especially from being in the industry.
Yeah.
Just a quick question. With Sony having a lack of first-party games, and we see a lot of layoffs and everything happening right now, do you think Microsoft specifically chose this time to start putting all the Xbox games or the 4 games that they're starting with on the PlayStation brand so that they can start grabbing some of the, basically the talking points in the ecosystem?
No, I don't. I mean, I think what's more likely is that their decision to do that and what you're seeing happening with Sony today is a simple response that these guys are having to the seismic changes in the landscape of the business model. I think, it's because you'd have to sort of have foresight of what was coming down the line with Sony well in advance before you made those decisions. And I'm sure people saw a correction coming at Sony, but I don't think anyone knew for sure, hey, it's going to happen on this date, and in that we're going to make sure we announce this. I think they're related, but they don't cause each other to occur, is what I would say.
Got it. And one more question. When Sony or Jim Ryan and PlayStation, when they purchased Bungie, Jim Ryan went in front of the Sony financial board and he said that Bungie, a $5 billion acquisition, would make Sony as much as $70 billion in comparison when he was comparing Activision and the purchase of Bungie.
Yeah.
At that time, I found that to be completely ludicrous, saying that could happen.
But
seeing that seeing that the situation happened where the CFO now took over Sony and you see all the layoffs, do you think Jim Ryan stepped down, or do you think that based on all the information and everything that has come out, that he was basically pushed out of the company?
It's really tough because I don't really know, because it's really easy to paint both scenarios, and it's also easy to go, well, if he was fired like Connie Booth was fired, you're not there for more than an hour than you have to be. And he stuck around for months since they announced it. So, but that doesn't mean that they didn't pull him in and say, okay, let's this isn't working anymore. This is the future, but let's make this a nice, easy exit for you. There's no way of knowing if you're just, unless you're like super insightful, without having some more information, it could have been either one. Because he did some really great things for Sony, and he also did some things that, depending on who you ask, it's certainly not his fault that the governments of the world allowed the Activision Microsoft thing to go through. But he is the figurehead, and he is the guy that was sort of out on the front lines, at least publicly, trying to stop it from happening. And how much blame did he get for it? Practically, I don't think you can really blame the guy, but that doesn't mean people didn't. So I don't really know.
Right.
All right. Thanks, Rico. I appreciate it, buddy.
I really appreciate it.
Anytime, buddy.
Yes, sir. Have a great day.
You too.
Yep.
There he goes, fellas. You can call in too and make your thoughts known. 619-786-3431. Why did Jim cash out his stocks? He knew this was the peak if they didn't get into games as a service. Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I don't know. I'm not saying, look, I mean, if you're an executive and you think you've ridden the horse as far as it can go at top speed and it's starting to slow down, yeah, you're going to jump. Okay. Hey, it's Jaffe. What's going on?
Hey, Jaffe. What's up, man? Love your show.
Thank you very much.
I had just a quick question.
Yep.
Kind of unrelated to Sony layoffs, but another thing that was a little bit uproar on social media was Pentiment, the Obsidian game that was previously exclusive on Xbox. It found out that it had a 120 frames per second on PlayStation, and the Xbox version didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And and Josh Sawyer had responded to some Xbox fans on Twitter saying, "Oh yeah, that was a bug, and we're going to patch it with the next update."
Okay.
But a lot of Xbox fans were upset about that because Sony got 120 frames per second and Xbox didn't from a first-party Xbox studio. Do you think that anger is warranted, or what do you think?
Well, I honestly think the number of people who are going to play a game like Pentiment probably barely know what frame rate means, let alone give a shit about 60 versus 120.
Right.
Not to knock Pentiment, but Pentiment is a your mileage will vary game. It's very unique and interesting, and the people that are watching Digital Foundry, figuring out what frame rate is better on what console, they're probably not the core audience. And no, the anger is warranted. No, shut up. That's my answer to them. Shut the fuck up. Enjoy games. This is part of the problem.
Right.
Enjoy the fucking art form. It's like I mean, unless you're like a real tech aficionado and you love that shit, and I appreciate that. But at that point, if you're so fucking hardcore into stuff like frame rate, you really need to have your attention on the PC. The fact that you're playing on these little $500 consoles and you act like you give a shit. I mean, it's like it's like watching Fast and the Furious with Toyota Corollas. It's like that's not the right car for what you care about. You know, that's what I would say.
Yeah.
All
Okay,
right, man.
cool.
Thank you,
And I
buddy.
actually yeah, take care.
All right. Thanks, man. I appreciate the call. Pepper Grinder is coming out March 28th, says Brett Moore. That is a great game. Sony needs more games like that. Again, the problem with that, though, is that, yeah, they could put out Pepper Grinder, and I think they should. And I think they should buy it and make it a day one game because it probably only cost God knows how much to make. Not a lot. But, boy, it's a great game. But they'll look at it and go, well, there's no profit in this for us. There's profit, but it's meaningless for us. Jojo D says it sounds like Sony needs to readjust their focus now that Microsoft's going full steam on Game Pass. Spencer even hinted. Spencer did not hint Call of Duty Day One. I thought it was pretty much definitively. He said it was. Maybe I got my news wrong, but I thought he said it was a Day One game. So we got Diablo 4 going over to Game Pass, and looks like we got Call of Duty, which is from the best studio. It's somebody sent me on Discord yesterday. It was Black Ops, the Gulf War, right? So you've got the Black Ops Gulf War by, is it Treyarch does the Black Ops games? Day One Game Pass. I mean, yeah, you know. And we've talked about this before. I mean, this is not me being an insightful guy. This is me just parroting shit I've heard. But it does make sense. Microsoft's like, look, we're not competing with Sony. We're competing with Amazon. We're competing with Apple. We're competing with Tencent. You know, Sony. I don't know. I don't know what would have happened. I mean, there was a point where Sony was just as good at making not the quirky shit. I don't think they could have become who they are with just continuing to make Parappa the Rapper. But if you mention, like Morgan said, stuff like Gravity Rush, which was never a really big hit, but, you know, there was a more diverse lineup. I wonder if they would have just, it's almost like they would have become a much cooler, high-tech version of Nintendo where they were more gameplay-centric. But now that they've kind of painted themselves into this definition, maybe, I mean, but Helldivers shows there's an appetite for more on that console. So, you get so big, only gigantic games matter, says Chris, which also makes you vulnerable to this kind of stuff, right? That's the nightmare of it, right? Is that all these guys that are being laid off today did exactly what they were asked to do. And in doing that, they were digging their own fucking graves. Sabo Productions, thank you, buddy, for the super chat. He says, every business is hurting right now. People don't want to spend money right now. And when the games aren't fun, layoffs are bound to happen. It's sad. I agree with everything except the games aren't fun. I think a lot of people, I mean, if you look at some of the big games Sony has put out recently, they've all done wonderfully critically. You know, people seem to love Horizon Forbidden West. People seem to love God of War Ragnarok. They weren't for me, but it sounds like from your comment, Sabo, which I appreciate, you're suggesting that if only the games had been fun, we wouldn't see these layoffs. I don't think that's the case at all, because I think a lot of people felt those games were fun. I think they just cost too much money. Yeah, of course. I mean, we're seeing the consequences of the boom that was experienced during COVID. Lockdowns lead to surges in game popularity, all that. Yeah, that's all true. But I don't think that's the main reason this is happening. I think the main reason this is happening is, I mean, it may be the main reason that it may be like the quarter you put into the machine at the goddamn Dave & Buster's, and that's the quarter that pushes all the other ones over the edge. But fundamentally, because you are seeing that at smaller companies as well. But fundamentally, the seeds of this were planted, you know, when Sean Layden left. Or he didn't leave either, when he was pushed out. Yeah, Garrett says, I miss the Jack Tretton days. And Sean Layden was spot on when he was walking out the door. Yeah. And I don't know if I think he was carried out the door. Jabril, thank you for the super chat, buddy. I appreciate it. He says, people say they want Sony to make all these different types of games, but never buy them when they do. You're kind of right. PlayStation stepped away from multiplayer games because people didn't support them on PS3. Okay, well, a couple things to that. Number one is you can't blame people for not supporting multiplayer games on PS3. That was Sony's fault. Sony was behind the curve when it came to getting their infrastructure set up, and yet they were still funding and selling games like Twisted Metal, like Starhawk, like SOCOM Confrontation, which I don't play. I don't play SOCOM much, so I don't know. I don't think people happen to love that game regardless. But their servers and their back end with the matchmaking and all that shit was so nascent compared to what people were used to on PC and Xbox, that if what you're saying is true and they took the lesson from those failed games as being, oh, people don't want multiplayer games on PlayStation, and they didn't take into account that that judgment was coming at a skewed level because of how poor those experiences were, then that's a them problem. That's not an issue with the multiplayer games. And I think obviously Helldivers is more than proof of that. Addy says, Layden fucking nailed it years ago. It's simply not sustainable. Okay, he did nail it. But why do you think a lot of people, some of which are in this very chat, continued to push back? It's like this guy was the fucking Herman Hulst of Sony. I don't know the hierarchy anymore. I don't know if he's officially was higher, but you know what I'm saying. And he came out and he told you what was going on. He says it's too expensive. And people were, well, shut up. Don't say that. You know, it's like you hate these games. I don't know, man. But you're right. You're absolutely right. Cyclone says, back in the PS3 era, their multiplayer games were horrible. I was an early adopter of PS3. It was rough. Yeah, well, tell me about it. Twisted Metal would have been a much bigger hit on PS3 if it wasn't for the fact that it was a goddamn nightmare to get the game to connect. And it was, I mean, I'll bring you in, Kill Dill, in just a second. We literally had so little experience as a company that I worked with and for that no one even thought to do a beta test. I mean, some of us did, and people were like, nah, we don't need to do a beta test for Twisted Metal. What? Okay, but all these other PC games, no, we don't need to do it. We're fine. Okay. We fucking needed to do it badly. Jabril Williams. Thank you, pal. I sure do appreciate you joining the Diet Soda Soldiers and your very generous super chat. Thank you for that, buddy, and thank you for the support. I very, very much appreciate it. In honor of your being initiated into the Diet Sodas, oh my God, Jaffe, stroke. Diet Soda Soldiers, I bring you Kill Dill. Kill Dill, it's Jaffe. What's going on? Hello? All right, well, you're on.
Hey, hello, buddy.
Hey, man, how are you?
Pretty good, man.
What's up?
Well, I just kind of think that PlayStation should really look at the success of Helldivers 2, and also like a lot of the headlines I've been reading. I don't know how prevalent this is, but it seems like there was a demand for PvP within the game. And I know the original Helldivers 1 wasn't PvP, but I was looking at some of the sales numbers on Helldivers 1, and I believe it sold around 2 million copies on Steam alone. And I can't find the official numbers for console sales, but I can't imagine it being that much higher. So I'm guessing ballpark like 4 million units on the original game.
Okay.
And and that came out, almost 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think Sony should look at that success and the demand for a PvP, and whether it doesn't have to be SOCOM, Killzone, Resistance. I know we've been, beating that dead horse with a stick forever, but
Yeah.
I think they should really consider some of those AA multiplayer experiences and try to fill that void with them not having COD, and looking at like certain things like how they turn around and canceled Factions 2 after they had Bungie do quality control for. And I mean, it makes sense, but at the same time, it's like Bungie doing quality control on anything Naughty Dog to me is just like, come on, guys. Like, obviously, that's not really. I mean, I could see why they'd want to get their money back with that, acquiring them, but they should have thought about that a little bit differently. And then turning around and remastering Factions 2, remastering The Last of Us 2 after they canceled Factions 2, and then seeing the surprise success of Helldivers 2. It's just kind of like, y'all need to rethink what you're doing. Double down on the AA and see if we can get some more of those experiences and see if they hit.
I don't think they're going to have any option but to double down on some AA. I think that's clear. I mean, you kind of see at least it's easy to suss out based on what Holst was saying about we need to reevaluate how we're doing this stuff. I think that's coming.
Yes, sir.
The idea of factions, I mean, first off, Remaster was in development parallel with factions. I don't think they were like,
Right.
let's cancel that and make this.
Yeah, exactly.
But
It was already in the pipeline.
Yeah, but a lot of it is kind of like what we were saying about Sony having to learn about online in general on the PS3. And so the players kind of suffered for it. It may have been, who the fuck knows why Factions was canceled in terms of, was Bungie right? Were they wrong? Helldivers is designed as a one-time $40 purchase. I don't know. Did they ever announce with Factions if it was going to be a purchase game or it was going to be free to play?
I think it was up in the air. I think it was either or. No one really knew what kind of template they were going for their games as a service or live service games. It was kind of like whatever they chose, I guess.
Right. So
it seemed like
obviously Helldivers is a hell of a lot less costly to make.
Exactly.
And it's still, I mean, that's the funniest part now is that, if you can be, and maybe it's this, maybe they need to get onto the Unreal 5. I know some of their games are using Unreal 5, but maybe they need to stop rolling their own with the Decima engine and all that shit, because it's like, if you look at how good some of these games look from Unreal 5 that are made by one person, and now imagine what a team of like 25 professionals could do. It's kind of, you could easily make a game that looks as good as Helldivers on Unreal 5, if not better. And it's like, yeah, they should totally jump on that board. And I'm sure they will. I mean, it's it's hard, when things are working. This sounds terribly obvious, but when things are working, they're working. And I imagine it's one of the biggest challenges as a leader in business, that when you are the leader and you're making tons of fucking money, it's hard to see the fact that, yeah, but this isn't going to last forever. And so we need to prep for what could be coming down the line, even though the industry is filled with examples of people who were on top and now they're not. But it would be tough, man. But I appreciate the thoughts and the call. Thanks, man. I appreciate it, buddy.
All right. Man. You have a good day.
You too. See you soon. Okay, let me get these super chats. Thank you, buddy. This is coming in from Germania1. Thank you, bud. Do you think Microsoft putting those 4 games on PlayStation has anything to do with the FTC watching them, and they are doing it so their next acquisition goes smoother? I mean, it's an interesting question, an interesting scenario you paint. I have no way of knowing that. My guess would be no, because frankly, if you really are doing it for the FTC, are you really going to? Here's Pentiment. I mean, if you're gonna do it as a publicity stunt, then you need to offer up something like Halo or something that at least has some meat on the bone. Pentiment's great, but I don't think anybody at the FTC is going to go, you know what? We thought they were greedy assholes not to be trusted. But now that PlayStation fans can play Pentiment, I don't know, boys. Maybe we had these guys wrong. I don't think so, but I have no way of knowing. But it's an interesting scenario you paint. Bold Alpha Pack, thank you, buddy. Bold Alpha Wolf Pack, of course, for the super chat. He says, I don't think it's an issue, bitch. I added the bitch because it's flavor. Of being too expensive. See, now my ADD meds are kicking in. I don't think it's an issue of being too expensive. It's an issue of the consumer base being narrow. If they start doing more multi-platform, you'll see these AAAs raking it in like Skyrim and GTA 5. All right, let me think about that. I don't think it's an issue of the games costing too much. It's consumer base being okay. So you're basically talking, you're not saying narrow-minded like in thematics or the type of game. You're saying there just aren't enough people who are available to play on a console that has, quote, only sold whatever the PS5 is only, quote, only sold. And sure, I mean, the more, it just goes back to Layden's thing. There's a pie of about 250 to 300 million console players. It doesn't seem to be growing. Other parts of the industry are growing at rapid pace, which makes you go, I mean, seriously, isn't that enough to make you go, why? And I think the answer is obvious, why? Which is, if you want, most people who want a story are going to watch a linear story in the theater or on television. They just are. because it takes too much energy at the end of the day to play a game. And so you can either solve that by going, there is a way to do interactivity that is much less energy costing, but still offers the thrill of controlling the outcome. And I don't mean like Bandersnatch, because that doesn't work. But you go down that road, or you say, yeah, let's get out of the narrative heavy space because it's too expensive and there's not enough people who want to consume narrative that way. It's just not the best way to consume narrative. So you kind of either look at it and go, we need to expand that 250 million to 300 million pie. But then you also get to the point that consoles are, you got to get in another way. That's why I'm a big fan of streaming. That's why you've seen it on cell phones and stuff. The average person, you got to do a lot to bring someone in who's not a console player into buying a console. And so if you're not going to grow the pie, then you need to eat more of the pie. Come on now. And in that, I think, yeah, you put your games wherever you can. I don't think that's sustainable either, by the way. I think unless that pie grows, you're eventually going to come to a point that even if you put God of War, Egypt cavalcade of destruction on every console out there, you're still not going to grow the pie. And the more you spend, the more you're going to continue to come up against this. Sabo, thank you, buddy. He says, Jaffe, what was the game industry like from 2007 to 2010 during housing market crash? In terms of layoff sales, game industry problems. I got to be honest with you, man. I don't remember. It's never been like this. I can tell you that, or at least maybe back in the early 80s, if you worked at Atari or any of those like spin-offs that were making publishing games for the 2600. But it certainly wasn't like this. I mean, 2007 was the, PS3 was out and 360 was out and games seemed to be doing well. I could be totally remembering it wrong. And I appreciate the question in the super chat, but I don't remember any kind of massive problems happening like this back then, or even close to this. Yeah, people talking about Helldivers being PvP. I don't. Well, wait a minute, Addy Pie. I'm not saying Decima is not. He says Decima is an incredible engine, Jaffe. Stop. The engine's not the problem. Yes, it is. I'm not knocking the quality of the engine. I'm saying that if you have a standard engine like Unreal 5, and if you are able to take assets that are already in existence and you can make things faster and it's more streamlined and you don't have to sort of learn a whole new set of tools and it's very finicky and specific and all that shit, games won't cost as much. And I'm sorry, but you have to, you have to sort of get and this sounds terrible, and I don't really mean this like it's going to sound, but you got to get the programmers out of the boardroom, because I've been in many meetings back in my day where it was like, it's going to look so much better and this and that and all, and a lot of times the executives will acquiesce and suddenly you'll be on a ride for an engine that's custom. And back in the day that made sense, but now it's like Unreal 5 looks amazing. Unreal 5 is staggering, and the number of people that are kind of like what Insomniac said in the leaks, the number of people that can really tell the difference between a $300 million game and a $120 million game is minor. And a lot of them work at Digital Foundry and watch those things. But that's not they're a very vocal, tiny minority. And so, yeah, you might get the blades of grass looking a little less aliased if you do Decima versus Unreal 5, but who cares? In the long run of the health of the business, who cares? I'd rather 25 people be able to express a really cool idea because in part they were able to make it for less money and faster, which is less money. I'm not calling out Digital Foundry, Levi, as a negative thing. I'm just saying that they represent a small number of people, but they're very successful with those small number of people. And in that, it kind of creates a perception that what they talk about really matters to the sales. It's like the guy who just called in and was asking about, what does it mean that Pentiment runs at 120 on PlayStation? For 99.9% of the gaming population that's going to play Pentiment, it doesn't mean shit. They don't care. They don't give a fuck. I would question. I mean, I don't know this. This could be wrong. It could be very naive and dumb what I'm saying. But I don't even know if I could tell the difference between 160 and 120 and 60 on my TV. Maybe I could. Yeah, Levi says it's a small number of people that spend more time focusing on performance and playing games. I'm just going to come out. Here's the stuff that I wonder as it relates to the company the studio I used to work for. What's going to happen at Sony Santa Monica, right? What's going to happen with the next God of War? Probably nothing. That's probably going to continue to move forward. Is Corey's project in trouble? Are there people at Santa Monica that are no longer at Santa Monica? I haven't checked the news since we started talking. I'm curious, I hope none of them are affected, but it's weird that all these other studios have gotten hit and we haven't seen anything regarding Santa Monica. Maybe that's just how good they are. Sony's canceled Twisted Metal. We saw that. Reevaluate how we operate. Has anybody... Santa Monica was hit with layoffs. Where are you seeing that? Because I'm not seeing that, and I'd like to look at that story. Santa Monica layoffs. Let Calvin know there's bagels if you want some. In a minute, baby. I'm doing this right now. Okay, Santa Monica PlayStation. Okay, let's see. Yeah, I don't see anything recently. When I was growing up in the 90s, says Alpha, you played the game for the story. Did the story hook you and great gameplay mechanic were a plus? It's the opposite nowadays. Well, it's interesting. I mean, the 90s, I guess, was when it sort of started, but the number of people that play for the story has kind of grown, and then maybe it's shrinking now. I don't know, because I don't think everybody in the 90s felt that way. I certainly didn't. I liked stories that were in video games, but that's not why I played video games. But more and more since Sony kind of became the mainstream of consoles, I heard people say that it's like, oh, I like the storytelling in video games more than movies, or that's where I get a lot of my stories. But I was just like, why would I want to go, I mean, it's not that I don't want a story in a game, but it's like more often than not, the better storytelling is happening elsewhere. So I never felt that way. But all right, you're saying Jason Schreier, who's blocked me, so I don't know, said Santa Monica will probably lose a project. Interesting. Okay, so Jason Schreier says, despite some recent scuttlebutt suggesting Twisted was close to release, the game was in early development and wasn't greenlit per source. Okay. Well, like I said, I know per my source, they were on the set of the TV show over a year and a half ago. So, I mean, there's been somebody working on it for a long time. Salvador, welcome back to the Diet Soda Soldier shirts. Good to have you here. Good to see you as always. Thank you for joining the crew and coming on to talk about this news story. What happened, Babbitt, is that Sony laid off 900 people. PlayStation specifically laid off 900 people. A bunch of studios got hit. A bunch of studios lost games, lost employees, and the amount or the fallout is still sort of remains to be seen specifically. Do you think this year will be enormous for layoffs? Well, it's already. I mean, now with Sony, we're over 7,000 people, and we're in February. So, yeah. And I don't even know, by the way, again, I don't have the data, but it feels like this is more than just the COVID correction, because the COVID correction, if that was the main reason, it would suggest that like tens and tens and tens of thousands of people were hired for video games. And I know a lot of people were hired. That's a lot of fucking people. And maybe that happened, but I think it's more the budgets, man. I think it's more the sustainability of this stuff. But we are seeing it with smaller studios. You know, a lot of small studios are shutting down as well. So, yeah, no kidding. Brett Moore says, when I grow up, I want to be a game developer. Never mind. Right. This, I've said it many times, and I'll say it many more times because it's important. Making games is yes, Salvador says Jaffe layoffs, Bukaki and Rathy no longer mods. Making games it's becoming easier to do, and that's excellent, but working in the business, unless they say to you, unless it does go more contract and people can work at home, which is another reason to embrace something like Unreal. So it's not like, you know, it's like, oh, let's for this project, let's bring on this programmer. He's got tons of experience with Unreal multiplayer shooters. Okay, we've locked him down for 2 years, but everyone's working remote. But the idea of being someone that think about the life you would have to live at this point. You would have, it's like being in the circus, but a circus that spends about 2 to 3 years in every city. It's like once the game is done, we're in Pittsburgh. I guess we're now going to Oregon. Now we're going to Santa Monica. Pull the kids out of school. Fuck you. Fuck you. Why the fuck would you want that job at this point? I mean, you're right, Brett. Yeah, never mind. Go make your games, man. Okay, but that's not true. Joker says every business can have sudden layoffs. It's not like video games are the only industry that has layoffs. Of course that's true. No one's saying that. But if you look at the AAA big budget video game studios, there is, even before COVID, there was a pattern of you staff up, you ship the game, you lay people off. You staff up, you ship, you lay people off. That was happening for decades before COVID came on. So now with the costs going up and it being so risk-filled, it's even worse. And so I'm not saying don't go into the business because you could get laid off. I'm saying don't go into the business because you probably will get laid off. You'll be part of a massive fucking sweatshop of a team where you're probably not going to be able to express your artistic desires, which why would you do this job when you could probably get paid a lot more doing another job at that point? And you're going to be moving all over the goddamn world. Addy Pie says people don't have the money to self-fund their games. It's why they join the industry. No, I don't agree with you. If you have the money to be smart enough and educated enough to get a job in the industry, that means you probably have a computer. And if you have access to a computer, then you have access to make your own games. I'm not saying you can make a living at it, but you know, most people have access to paper and pen, but they can't become novelists or screenwriters. It doesn't stop people from trying to write their fucking book or trying to write their movie. Don't go into the business, says Cyclone, to change it or work at the same company. No, I agree with you. I agree. So anyway, well, there we go. That's the news. I'll talk about whatever you guys want to talk about at this point. I don't think there's really anything else to say on this unless you guys know of something that you think we should chat about. But whatever you guys want to talk about, let's do it. But what I'll tell you is that on that topic, there's no more news coming, so we'll just have to kind of see. But I'll talk about whatever you guys want for a little bit, and then I'm going to head off and put up the members only podcast. My brain is leaking, and then I'm going to prep a Gavin Games for this afternoon. I will give you my rating for the Kojima documentary. There will be a review of it in that podcast I was just talking about. So I will tell you, it was exactly as cringe as I thought it would be, but it was also a lot better and more inspiring than I thought it would be. So I was pleasantly surprised, and I wasn't surprised at all, depending on what part of the documentary you're talking about. One Winged Angel says AI is going to do most of the heavy lifting for game creation. I agree. So the layoffs make sense. I mean, I don't know if we're going to be at a point where AI can make meaningfully on the regular viable video game products for quite some time. I don't mean like not in our lifetime. I think we'll get there very soon. But I don't think it's going to be in the next, I don't think these layoffs are because of that. Maybe in a small way, but I think that percentage is going to meaningfully grow. Absolutely. No doubt. 1 second. Sooner than later. Absolutely. Can I find a mole in the UK that can confirm the Twisted Metal game is canceled? I don't really know a lot of people in the UK. It's Sony, and even if I did, it sounds like it's already been confirmed. And I agree with that, RPG. AI and automation will take most jobs. Universal base income is coming. Right. Wonderful. I think that's, I don't know if universal base income will be enough, but I think something's got to give. Absolutely. That's why when people hear me talk about AI and all that, they're like, don't you care about the jobs? I care very much about the jobs. But that's not where I'm coming from when we're having the kind of more philosophical conversation. We have to assume that's going to get solved in one way or another, because if it doesn't, AI can do all it wants to do all day long. But if people can't afford to buy the goddamn AI flipped hamburgers, don't matter. Jaffe, what's the name of the female character whose statue is behind you? Thigh-high boots. That is Zatanna from DC Comics. She is their, I wouldn't say she's their Doctor Strange, because that's more like Dr. Fate over there, but she is a magician that has the ability to manipulate reality. She's kind of like Scarlet Witch, but she's got more of a direct line to her powers, where she kind of makes these spells, and if she says something backwards, which is a lot of fun in the comics because you read it and you have to read it backwards, and she's hot and she's cool, and I'm a big fan. And I think they've been talking about making a movie, but at this point, who knows? Spectre Bull says the hysteria on Twitter, so many people acting like PlayStation's on the verge of shutting down. No. PlayStation's not going anywhere. It's just changing. It has to change, but that doesn't mean it's in trouble as a brand. That's dumb. Hey, it's Jaffe. What's up?
Hey, Jaffe. I had a question. Let's talk about all these layoffs and like the scope of games and, inflated budgets these days. If you were running, say, like Sony or Xbox or whatever, what would you do, I guess, given that like game budgets are so massive these days and the scope's going to be so big, like, right. What would, I know it's kind of a big question, but like, what would your initiative be? Or like, what would your vision?
If my goal was, I could start with a blank piece of paper and they said, look, here is the games division. We don't care if you use PlayStation 6. We don't care if they were just say, how do you run a successful company? I would get out of the console business. I would focus on AA, indie, and super indie games, and I would make them commercial concepts, and I would also make them gameplay centric. It doesn't mean I'd make them hardcore at all. I'd still want to have great IPs and great narrative in there and everything, but I would I would basically probably be Nintendo, but instead of making Nintendo games that are cutesy, I would be like PG-13 Nintendo, I guess is what I would do. I would focus on the gameplay. I would focus on what the strength of the medium. I would stop trying to think that we're making movies and paint ourselves into a corner that is never going to be sustainable, and instead focus on what the medium does well. So, and I would get out of the console market, because the console market's going to be dead in 10, 15 years anyway. And I would just sort of build myself up as a wonderful content provider that doesn't really isn't really susceptible to the whims of that particular market. Instead, it's like, hey, we can be anywhere. PC, we can be on consoles, we can be on the phone, we can stream to a Samsung TV. It doesn't matter. That's what I would do.
Got it. So you would just basically be like, say, like I don't know, like an EA or Activision Blizzard, but just like you're making your own.
But not as costly. Like I said, I'm not saying I wouldn't want our games to look good, because a lot of times what you see is you see something that is indie, but it's not just indie in price and maybe even art style, but it's indie in thematic. I would still want to try to make very commercial products. So I would want to make a AA multiplayer shooter. I would want to make something that can appeal to a large swath of the audience, not just core gamers. But I would want to do it putting gameplay front and center and not the production value front and center, because again, that's a cliff. You're headed towards that cliff the minute you start working. It's just a question of how long you're willing to stay on the road before you fall off, and is that built into your business model? And that's not really fun for me. I would rather focus on what the medium does well at any cost.
Yeah. I mean, like what you're describing, I know you kind of said before, like podcasting, doing what you're doing as your thing, but I would love to see that, man. I don't know if you get kind of that spark one day to start your own studio.
I think I would love to be involved in things like that. The problem is I don't want to build it, right? And because that work is so exhausting. I remember trying to raise the money for Bartlett Jones to get it started. And even though Sony ultimately was the ones that said, hey, we'll do this with you, which I was incredibly grateful for, there was a year before that of flying all over the country and getting up at crazy hours to make flights and, pitching. And it was just exhausting. And it was terrifying because you never knew if you were going to find the money or not. And the building of that is not fun for me. But if somebody were to call me and say, hey, come do that here, I'd go, oh, okay, sure, why not? But again, I mean, I my track record as a creative executive is hit and miss, but I guess that's everybody. Whose isn't? So, but anyway, I appreciate the call, man. It's an interesting question. That's what I would do.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Jaffe.
See you, bud. All right, fellas. Well, there you go. Hey, wake up. Thank you, buddy, for the super chat. He says, I feel like we would have gotten a tease, like a screenshot by now. Sony isn't making a new Twisted Metal, for fuck's sakes. Well, they were. They absolutely, I mean, again, I haven't seen it either, but all I needed to hear was from people on the set of the Twisted Metal TV show, hey, we just met with the development team of a new Twisted Metal game. I mean, if that's what I heard. And so I have no reason, why would they lie to me? It wasn't like it was in the press or anything. It was just, we were having a phone call. So when did you have a hit as an executive? Addy Pie, when I was creative director of Sony Santa Monica, I did. A couple of them, actually. Let's see. Okay. All right, fellas. Well, that was a kick in the pants way to wake up. Seriously, for all the folks at Sony, man, I'll tell you, that's rough. And God, I just have so many questions about who got hit, and at what level, I guess we'll know more soon. But Addy Pie, I'm going to be putting up the members only thing later today, and then I'll be trying to get a Gabbin' and Games off the ground today as well. 1 second. Hey, it's Jaffe. What's up?
Hey, Jaffe. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Doing good. So I was wondering, we kind of saw like with Sony changing to focusing more on these cinematic, kind of narrative-driven experiences.
Right.
I was wondering if that was something you noticed while you were working in the industry. Like, how did the industry kind of change, during the 2000s up until you kind of left? Is that something you kind of noticed, with not even just with the executives, but more like with the developers as well? Was there more of a desire to be like, I want to tell a major, big story?
Look, I think one of the reasons I push back so hard now is because I was one of those people. That's what God of War 1 was for me. I really was like, we can merge these two things. And for me, I realized after we shipped God of War, as proud of it as I am, and as grateful as I am that we got to make those games, I recognize that maybe we were barking, or I was barking up personally the wrong tree, and I think the medium could be used in ways that made more sense for what the medium shines at. So, but in that time, whether you're talking God of War or Uncharted, there was absolutely at least within Sony, a transition away, as gamers know, from like the Jack and Daxters and the Ratchets of the world to all of these, let's make, story narrative, prestige TV games. And that's kind of one of the reasons I just kind of lost interest. It just wasn't for me. And my stuff was never that. But my stuff didn't do well after God of War. If I would have stayed on that train, I'm sure, I was pretty good at working on that stuff. And, but I was like, nope, I'm going all in on game. And my game design skills are probably not as good as, or definitely not as good as my sort of making movie game skills when it comes to sort of what I would bring to the table. And so, but I still very much believed in it. But I saw a lot of that. Yeah, you absolutely were able to see in real time that shifting. And you can see it from PS3 to PS4. By the time we get around to PS4, if you even remember the announcement of the PS4, and I think it opened with the guys from Sucker Punch, who came out with Infamous for PS4. And it was like if you remember their pitch on stage, it was all like, what if
the authoritarian, I remember that.
Right.
Yeah.
It was like, what if the authoritarian, and it's like, what? Yeah. And and that's fine. A lot of people love that. But for me, I'm just kind of going, what? Why are you talking about that? I don't talk about the games, So you could see it happening in real time. Absolutely. And this is where we are. That's what I think.
That was, sorry to interrupt. Do you think that was like, just the developers were kind of getting older, and they're like, I feel like they're feeling more auteur, or what do you think?
I think
really
it's a lot of bullshit, and I would call this out, and people would get mad at me. I think it was a lot of people believing the press that, one thing enabled the other thing. And so the press would be all like, oh, these are auteurs, and they're artists, and they're this, and they're that. And you'd start sniffing your own farts and believing it was smelled like cheese pizza. And you're like, I like cheese pizza. So, but they believed it, and they started behaving like it, and the games were making a lot of money, and people were like, oh my God, this is an amazing story. And these characters changed my life. And I'm sure that's true. I'm not saying those are lies when people said that, but, that became the rabbit to chase on the dog track, and it stopped being celebrated. I remember sitting in a Sony executive's office, and they were telling me how much they absolutely loved the game Sound Shapes, and I thought Sound Shapes was great as well. I think it was the Vita or the PSP, I don't remember. And it was just like, he's like, but yeah, we couldn't sell enough copies of it, I think they broke even and stuff and made a profit, but it's just, it was so clear that the people that were working there really wanted to take the medium and become artistic and become storytellers. And I just always thought that was so stupid. No offense. You can tell a story.
I agree. I think a lot of developers have kind of lost focus of that. It's a game. It's gameplay first. Gameplay.
And you can tell story in gameplay.
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to story. I love strong IP. I'm not opposed to any of that. But when think about the money that gets spent on these fucking cutscenes, and all this shit that does not matter. It's staggering. Like, I wonder about this guy who came in, the CFO, who's the interim president now at PlayStation, and he hasn't been inundated with all this stuff. And so he comes in and probably says, why are you spending all this fucking money on all this shit when a game like Power World comes along that cost almost nothing, and look what it's making? That was just the practical way to look at it. And it's like, no, I need to have this new technology written, so every time the character breathes, depending on how the player has been playing, it takes into account the hit points and the the telemetry of the players. You know what I'm saying? Just all this shit that gamers didn't even notice, but it sounded good for the press. I think it was poorly managed. I think somebody should have been up there going, wait a minute, guys, what the fuck are we doing? We can be artists, we can be visionaries, and that's great, but that's not the job. The job is to make compelling product. And if by way of doing that, you become a visionary, or you have to become a visionary and people think you're the next big thing, cool. But that's not what we're paying you for. We're paying you to make a product that will entertain and delight people, even if it's depressing as fuck. So that's what I would say.
I'm curious if if they did, something like what you were suggesting earlier, somewhat, but more like having, okay, here we're going to have smaller teams in to make smaller projects, kind of like what Japan Studio did. If they kind of went back to that for some respect, I wonder what they would put out. Would they try to be more gameplay focused, or if they would try to be more, oh, well, this is a narrative experience. I wonder if those kind of habits would die hard
I think it would be better. I think it would be. That's why people are like, never get mad at me when I push things like sub services. I think if you can say, if you're forced to be a storyteller with a lot less money, you are going to lean on the medium strengths, which is interactivity. You're not going to lean on all this sort of superfluous shit like cutscenes and professional actors and all this shit. You're going to go, well, that's not really our strength. Let's focus on how do we tell this story and make the player feel a certain emotion, but do it through the essence of what the medium is about. I mean, I think the personal pain aside that's coming from all this, I think fundamentally there's a good chance that we'll actually see growth in the medium because of it, is what I would say.
Well, yeah, I would hope that it would be the smaller budgets would be, well, how do we focus more on this being fun rather than how, I mean, narrative can be a thing in it, but I feel that
I think fun is always the wrong word. I think engagement is the right word. Well, I don't think it has to be fun, because that implies that Sony should just be making, old school arcade games or shit, and I think you can still make serious, somber, meaningful pieces of interactive art. I wouldn't make that the main thing they make, but I think you can do that. But if you're doing it through cutscenes, you're already barking up the wrong tree, in my opinion. Because let's put it this way. If these fucking games that are supposed to be the next generation of storytelling are so fucking great, then that pie that Sean Layden talks about would have grown a long time ago. Instead of being stuck at 300 million console gamers, you would have suddenly 1 billion people that are flocking. All you have to do is look at the movies in the early 1900s. The movies were immediately a massive success, at least for a type of people. It was kind of a lowbrow art form for a long time, but it wasn't like they had to struggle to go, why aren't people going to the movies other than this core group? Everybody went to the fucking movies. Just like everybody plays Candy Crush. No, I mean, not Candy Crush. You know what I'm saying? Just simple pick up and play games. And so I think focus on the gameplay. You can be as artistic as you want, but you got to do it through the gameplay. That should be what's written on the wall at Sony, kind of like in Ted Lasso, where it says "Believe." There should just be a sign at every Sony studio that says it's all about the fucking interactivity. Or something like that, more pithy or more better written. Get one of these writers to write the goddamn thing. But it's like focus on what the medium does, and then be artistic. But be artistic within that pen. If you want to tell a story the traditional linear way, that's cool. Sony Pictures is down the street. Go see if they'll hire you. But that's not what we do here. That's what I would say.
Yeah, it's fortunate about the layoffs, but hopefully, something that like this will eventually lead to them rediscovering, what's that we got. It's got to focus on what makes a game different from a movie or everything like that. So 100%. Hopefully that will be the direction.
Hey, Elden Ring seems to have it right. Look at Elden Ring. Look at those guys. There are people in the business get it right, but right now not so much at Sony. All right, buddy. Thank you for the call. I appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you.
Uh-huh. All right, you guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for hanging out with me this morning. I'll be back later today with more content, but for now I'm going to head off, get breakfast with the fam. Thank you, new members, welcome. Super chats, thank you. Longtime members, thank you. Mods, thank you. Lurkers, thank you as well. It's always good to have everybody here, and I'll see you guys soon. All right, take it easy, everybody. Bye.